like it. All right, red light means record, I hope. All right, so this presentation, what it's about, originally my intent, it wasn't an assignment for a class, but I really want to take this to our instructional leadership team and then maybe eventually to the district, just some things that I noticed within our PLC groups. So I focused this kind of research, this action research on collaborating in professional learning communities, using common instruction, and common assessments to increase student achievement in content area PLCs. I'm going to use the word common instruction a lot. I want it to be very clear when I'm presenting this that yes, that looks different in different PLC groups and different content areas. You can do a full-on collab where you walk in and classes are mirror image, but I don't think that's necessarily all that encompasses collaboration. It doesn't have to be that way to be highly effective. I think the most important thing is when you have experts in fields sharing ideas and then borrowing, stealing from each other, and taking the best and then adapting it to yourself to be highly effective. So when I'm talking about collaboration, I'm talking about the second thing, not the first thing, okay, in this little presentation. Okay, first off, kind of the background. Content area PLCs have been implemented in our school, but data has not been analyzed to determine if they are truly effective in increasing student achievement and creating consistency. And this is the real deal, creating consistency in the mastery of standards across the student population. We feel like it is. I think we've internalized that as a faculty and administration and counselors, but I don't think we've really truly looked at hard, like actual content data. Context. Most educators agree that collaboration in PLCs is a crucial component of improving best practices and student mastery, but data needs to be analyzed in our school to determine the current level of implementation and how effective our PLCs are at increasing student achievement. Okay? So, basically the purpose of this action research is to determine if student achievement is increasing in specific content areas and if student mastery of standards is getting more consistent over time. So it's not just about increasing our achievement, but it's about being more consistent and like lowering and shrinking the gap groups and things like that. So that's really what this is more about. I think we've all accepted the fact that PLCs have made us better academically. But I'm focusing a lot too on just consistency and being very consistent and thorough what we're doing. Okay? So the organization of the study. Research questions will be answered by triangulating data from #1 summative assessment scores across student population. Okay, school EOC scores from the past 3 years and PLC collaboration surveys that I sent out to the instructional leadership group. All right, interventions. So recommendations include, #1, to assist PLC groups in next step strategies to further the collaboration process. And that's where the instructional leadership team part comes in. What's next? What are we going to do next? And then provide assistance to other schools in our district specifically to increase student achievement district-wise. So to maybe take what we're doing to the district level, fine-tune it, hone it, make it like a real thorough, organized system, and then implement that in the other schools as well. Okay. Now I will say this before I get into this. I'm a firm believer that the PLC system does not work unless you have the proper culture already existing to implement it. So this system is all great and everything, but if it's not internalized by the faculty, by the administration, if it's not part of who we are, then it's going to fail. And I think that's really the secret of success versus failure when it comes to PLCs. So my action research question was engaging in collaborative content area of PLCs will increase student achievement. That's my statement. My questions are, does implementing content area professional learning communities at the high school level improve student achievement in EOC tested areas? #2, will engaging in content area PLCs at the high school level increase student achievement on summative assessment scores in specific content areas? And then finally, and the most important for me, is does the creation and implementation of common assessments and common instructional practices in the content areas create more consistency in student achievement and the mastery of content standards across the student population? All right, so review of literature. I'm going to go through this real quick. I do want to tell you, I was talking to Mr. Foster about this the other day. There's not a lot of data out there that actually hard quantitative data that supports PLCs and their success. I was shocked to find that. I feel like people generally agree with it, but there's not really been a lot of research to actually prove that it works. But the research I did find was very evident that it does work, but there's very little of it. So I chose 3 things, and I'll kind of let you go with my thinking. First off, I reviewed The Power of Teacher Leadership by Barry Johnson and Montgomery. The key ideas of this is that the report focuses on one elementary school in North Carolina. It was identified as struggling. Okay, the school is a rural school with more than 60% on free and reduced lunch, so that gives you an idea of the student population. It's a struggling school, it's a poverty area, things aren't that great there. The school improved from just above 50% of students performing at or above grade level to 80% in 4 years by implementing PLCs. How did they do it? They report their credit and dramatic increase of student achievement to 2 factors. Number 1, teachers are engaging in effective professional learning teams. Okay, they recognize teachers as experts, they share instructional practices, they problem solve, and they use protocols to make decisions together. Okay, and then also, which I think is really important to comment on, is 50% of their teachers have or are in the process of being National Board Certified to help close the achievement gap. Excuse me. The next piece I have here. Oh, sorry. So basically the takeaway from this literature is we have a 30% increase in student performance because of PLCs and highly qualified teaching. Okay? All right, next. We've got powerful learning, creating learning communities in urban schools. So now I've gone from a rural school to an urban school. This article, and it's also not an elementary school, but it's a middle school. So I'm kind of trying to take cross sections from all different types here. The article focuses on Woods Edge, an urban middle school that is part of a larger reform movement. Its goal was to increase student achievement in a 5-year time period, so that was their goal. All right. The school's main reform platform was this. Number 1, to move away from ineffective workshop and sit and get trainings. So they scratched all that. They're not doing that anymore. They felt that meaningful time needed to be spent amongst teachers working together collaboratively. And number 2, to develop authentic professional learning communities focused on pedagogy, so teaching, okay, and student achievement. So those are their 2 main focuses when they're doing this. The results are this. The student achievement increased dramatically in all socioeconomic and academic groups in the 5-year time period. The school shifted from 50% of students passing all core subject areas on the state standardized test in 99 and 2000 to 90% of all students passing all core subject areas in the same standardized tests in 01 and 02. So the takeaway from this is they moved from acceptable to exemplary in a 3-year period, which very much mirrors what we've done in the past 3 to 4 years. Okay? Now, the last piece, and I know this is kind of dragging it out, but I found this one very, very important because a lot of teachers will argue that I don't care about standardized tests. I'm more interested in my students being able to think critically, and that's how I define student achievement. So this school did the same thing. They had that type of mentality as well. So it's not just about standardized tests and scoring well on standardized tests. This school, they did research here, and the research has been done to examine the effects of PLCs on student achievement on standardized tests that oftentimes do not assess students' ability to think critically. So that was their problem. They said, okay, but what about thinking? Can these kids be metacognitive? Can they use analytical skills? The study examines the impact of PLCs on authentic student learning by measuring students' ability to engage in critical thinking across core content areas. Okay, the research team gathered and analyzed survey data, and I'm not going to bore you with it, but it was the most extensive research done on PLCs, period. They did 609 teachers, almost 6,000 students. They pulled 5,100 samples of student work dealing directly with critical thinking. Okay, so I'm not going to read through those findings for you because it's really long. But their reform suggestions for all schools in the nation is this: the national state policymakers need to shift from quick reforms such as developing standards and accountability systems that hold stuff over people's heads, and actually focus on teacher and school development instead. And that is a big focus on PLC. So in summary, PLCs plus authentic pedagogy, you've got expert teachers, plus social support from the community and the schools will lead to high authentic learning. And it all focuses and starts with PLCs and pedagogy. Okay? Letting teachers be experts. So how did I triangulate my data? Here we go. So collaboration in PLC and content PLCs is the focus. I took unit assessment scores. Okay, I compared data from the same unit assessments from the previous and current school year. on the exact same test, okay, to be consistent. I will be honest, a few questions have changed, but it's basically the same test. But that's mostly thanks to Sue making our test better. Step 2, I wanted to take EOC scores, so I compared EOC scores from the past 3 years in all content areas to check for growth over time. We've already done that, honestly, as a school, but I think it's important to revisit that and show how it connects to all this. And then PLC collaboration surveys. The step 3 here is analyze results from the PLC collaboration survey to look for, number 1, commonalities and practices, number 2, areas of improvement, and number 3, use of common assessments and data analysis in PLC groups. I was very pleasantly surprised with the surveys I got back. Okay, and people were very honest, which I was very pleased with. All right, so first off, unit assessment scores. What I've taken here is just a sample random from 2014-15. These were our unit assessment scores by standard. So this isn't by question, it's by standard for the Colonial and American Revolution unit. Okay? I did the same, I'm sorry, that shouldn't say Colonial American Revolution unit, that should say Civil War and Reconstruction unit. Sorry, I made a mistake there. But if you notice here, when you look at these, there are some standards that are mastered. Okay? And this is the first year we started really truly implementing collaboration in U.S. history for PLCs, like really deeply. And if you notice, standards are mastered, but there's a huge range. There's not consistency here. We really only mastered 3 standards. And then the ones that weren't mastered, they were all over the board. You've got them 60, 64%, 66%, 55%. But over the next year, because we fine-tuned and we've stayed consistent with what we're doing and fine-tuned our practice, you'll notice that the exact same standards, there's a higher achievement on the mastery of the standards, but on top of that, they're also much more consistent. There's not as big of a gap in the mastery of the standards. So you're getting a lot of consistency going on by being thorough, revisiting data from the previous year, fine-tuning as we go. And I mean, it's a tool to really use. And my personal belief is you can't have a frank conversation about mastery of standards until you start looking at data in this way. Until you really start looking at it, and this tells me that we're doing the right thing when we're doing this, and it's leading to our students being more successful academically, but also just as far as mastering content as we're going on. Okay? Some would disagree. All right, so also I took our EOC scores. All right, we've seen this before, we're very proud of this. Here you've got percent proficient and distinguished. It's kind of hard to see from back there. But in a lot of categories, we were really, we were very much some ahead, some below the state average, some right at the state average. But because of, this is our second year, by the way, 2014-15, in my opinion, the second year of truly getting into PLCs. So we've improved, but there's still some area for growth. And then you really see it kickstart in that 3rd year. When we get to this 3rd year, you're really seeing the benefits. So schools that are incorporating PLCs, if they're doing it half-hearted, and then they're abandoning it and not really staying with it for 3 to 4, maybe even 5 years, they're not going to reap the benefits of it. And I feel like because we've stayed consistent with it and the teachers have internalized the process, we're seeing the benefits on that on our standardized tests. And I think that is good for us, it's good for our school. Okay. And then finally, EOC scores, okay? Or I'm sorry, this is EOC scores continued. Obviously, we were proficient and progressing last year, that's a good thing, but we took a huge jump and became distinguished and progressing this year. But the cool thing here is in 2012 and 13, when we really, truly, in my opinion, first started implementing PLCs, we had a huge growth. We were a school that needed improvement. I mean, we needed a lot, there was a lot of growth that needed to happen for us. We were just kind of a run-of-the-mill school. We weren't doing poorly, but we weren't doing awesome either. And now we're really excelling. And I think a big part of that, besides having highly qualified teachers, great administrators, great counselors, is the incorporation of PLCs. Okay? So the bottom line, the takeaway from that data analysis, our performance has increased year over year. Okay? I mean, the proof is in the data right there. So this is one PLC survey. This is one of the English PLCs. This is Dan Barrett's PLC. And he was very frank. I really appreciated his frankness in what he wrote. Some takeaways from this is that, and my takeaway from all our PLCs is this. First off, Dan's like all the other PLCs, they're great PLCs. We actually have really strong PLCs. The teachers are collaborating, they're sharing ideas. They all look very differently, and I think that's okay. But the key concept that I found that they're all doing is they're using common assessments, they're sharing ideas, they're okay with disagreeing with each other when they don't want to use the same exact thing, that's totally fine. Okay? But Dan's survey gave me a lot of knowledge as an instructional leader, and that is, as a learning team, we collaborate regularly to analyze student achievement data. Dan noted that they're having a hard time finding the time to go back and actually stop and really look at the data to make next steps. We still have PLC groups that are struggling with that component of it. They're collecting the data, they're using common assessments, but they're struggling with that next step. Not all, but some. And then also, as a learning team, we make decisions to adjust instructional practices. Well, you're not going to adjust the instructional practices till you analyze the data. You know, so that's kind of where a lot of our PLCs are at this point. A lot of them are doing this as well. For example, our U.S. history group, we're doing this. We're really good at this. We go back, we look at it, we analyze it. Debbie Pitcock gave us a great idea in our instructional leadership meeting that we were all like, we need to do that. And Sue's like, yeah, I've been doing that. Y'all need to like get on my level. Okay? So anyway, so the next steps are different for each PLC group. Okay, that's where we're at. It's very individualized for each instructional content area and what they're doing, and that really needs to be dug into in the instructional leadership meetings, in my opinion. Like, what do you need to do? Let's talk about that, and let's help you get to that next step, because I think it's going to create a lot of consistency for our students when we do that. And you're really gonna find through that process that my opinion, that each one of these content areas, they're gonna get more consistent. They're gonna have to go through things with a more fine-tooth comb and do a much more thorough job. They're already doing great jobs, but I think it might take some of them to the next level. So, these are my results and findings. Okay, number one, as far as unit assessment scores go, okay, we have consistency and mastery of standards over time. Okay, that's apparent and obvious. We have an increase in student achievement over time. So that's showing us real quick that our PLCs are a big part of that. Okay, transition, as far as EOC scores, we had a transition from a needs improvement school 3 years ago to a school of distinction in 3 years. Okay, that's huge jumps. And then PLC collaboration surveys. Content PLCs are incorporating, number one, common assessments, number two, common instructional practices, and number three, for the most part, analysis of data assessments. Okay? And if you ask Dan, does he go back and look at his tests and analyze it? He's going to say yes. We're talking more about a systematic, looking at numbers, comparing it to actual standards, content, things like that. Okay? All right, so takeaways here. Implementing content area professional learning communities at the high school level does improve student achievement in the EOC tested areas, for sure. Engaging in content area professional learning communities at the high school level does increase student achievement on summative assessment scores in specific content areas. And in the creation and implementation of common assessments and common instructional practices, and again, I'm not talking about mirror image classrooms necessarily, just sharing, okay? In content areas does create more consistency in student achievement in the mastery of content standards across the student population. And that's really what I wanted to get to more than anything. I felt like I knew the first two for a fact before I really delved into this to prove it, but I wasn't so sure about the third one, and I feel like that is also holds very true based on my findings. So, next steps, recommendations.
Does anyone know where lunch RTI is today?
Number one, you want to take the PLC collaboration survey results completed by each PLC group to the instructional leadership team, who are the facilitators of each PLC group, administrators and counselors, to analyze the results of the survey. Number two, you want to create next steps to improve PLC collaboration in specific content areas to increase student achievement and improve our practices as educators. You want to help the PLCs that have not incorporated common assessments yet, if there are any floating out there. I haven't found any, to be perfectly honest, but if we do have some outliers, we might want to look at doing that, because my belief is it has made things more consistent for our students and for the teachers. And then number four, take this information to the district level to help all schools in our district to increase student achievement across the district. And then so for the next instructional leadership meeting, which I believe is the first week in December, I would like to take this information to them if you want me to. So the conclusion is this, and this is where we're going to wrap up. Engaging in this action research plan has confirmed that collaboration in PLC groups, when designing common assessments, data analysis, and creating adjustments based on those does increase student achievement. It does create consistency. Okay? I can take these findings from this research, especially from the PLC survey, to help the instructional leadership team. And then finally, as a potential instructional coach or administrator, I can conduct the action research on the current state of PLCs in other schools and use what I found to help other people and guide them in our process that we're doing so well in our school. So, that's where we are. Questions, comments?
Couple.
Yep.
Your literature review that talked about I think it was the third piece that talked about critical thinking.
Yes.
How did they measure that?
That is a great question. They did it, they have tables. I can get you the literature review and I will show you the table where they compared the different skills based onto the instructional practices, and they did it in a grid-like fashion. They took several different types of assignments to do it. So it's not easy to answer that question because I would have to sit down, we'd have to break down the table and look at it.
The reason I asked that, I think one of the things for us as a school, I often worry that we've lost instructor response because it is so eye-opening to see a kid's thinking or lack thereof. And I wonder if their means for collecting data for critical thinking came with a written component. You know, where it would be
I can attest that, absolutely it did. Yeah.
So I think that's something we as a school always have, we probably need to look at that a little bit deeper, you know.
They looked at writing, all types of writing, all different types, from argumentative, so on, all the English writing components. They also looked at like project-based stuff, where kids were creating actual projects, solving problems, things like that, so. Definitely.
I think one other thing to look at for future, because I look at our school and PLCs often, and one of the things that I always ask myself, and I kind of know the answer, but I don't. I guess I have an opinion. I often wonder if EOCs were broader, if they were more than just one of the social studies courses or one of the math courses, would that force those PLCs to be more highly functional? Basically, you three as a U.S. History PLC, your data's out there for the world. Is the Survey of Social Studies group that high functioning? Is the World Civ group that high functioning?
Right.
And if their data was out there for the world, would it say the same thing? Does that make sense?
That's a great point. Yeah.
So I think maybe looking a step further and looking at EOC PLCs versus non-EOC PLCs, I think would be a good thing. I think it would be eye-opening for all of us as a school.
Sure.
There's nowhere to hide, I guess is a good
Yeah,
word.
and I'll be the first to admit, when we've switched this 54 block, it is difficult to incorporate a writing component. It just, and especially when they killed the writing component on the EOC.
Sure.
It's just like, it's become like this sidebar thing. If you can do it, great. We do our non-negotiable writing piece, you know, and at times I make them do their thinking. Like today we did, you know, I did a debate on the Syrian refugee and they had to demonstrate their thinking in that way, not just say yes or no and all that stuff. So those things are still happening, but it's not super, in my opinion, formalized anymore the way it was maybe 5-6 years ago when I first started teaching here. So, any more questions?
Good
Comments? Yeah, I feel like some of this stuff, honestly, you know, we had a good feeling on it, but it's nice to just see it, how it's all working together. And it's nice, it was very comforting for me to realize that, and I've been working on this for quite a while, this has been an idea in my head for a long time, but that we're just being more consistent. That's the most important thing to me. We're improving, and that's awesome, but we're improving and we're getting more consistent, which is really cool. I don't feel like content's slipping through the cracks, and I think it shows up on the EOC because we're being so much more thorough than we have been in previous years. So, it's...
Do you think part of it might also be, and I don't know if this is primarily coming from PLCs, that maybe people are being much more focused in their instruction?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes,
You know,
yeah.
because I don't know if they're being more focused because they're working closer with the standards or
I can
against the
tell,
PLC
I
or
can
what?
and I'll attest to that. you know, I was talking to Mr. Mason this morning about, you know, how I taught World Civ and how World Civ wasn't EOC tested, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. But I felt like I could shoot from the hip a little bit more, and stuff like that. But I found with working with you and working with April, I have become much more laser focused on my standards. Like we start there with everything we do, and you know, with Mr. Huber incorporating standard based, you know, learning and stuff like that. You know, I think that looks different in every subject, and I think it also has to fit the personality of the PLC groups, the people in the PLC groups. But I think it's just highly intelligent of us as a faculty to stop and say, we need to focus more on our standards. And that's where our education needs to start, because ultimately that's where the accountability is coming from. But more importantly than that, when you really look at our standards, it's all about critical thinking as well. You know, they're having to be really critical in what they're doing. You know, and teachers, sometimes they brush over the critical thinking part and they just get right to the facts, especially in our content area, I think. But I think we do a pretty good job. There's always room for improvement, but I think we've done a much better job. I feel like I'm a much better teacher than I was 3 years ago before I started working with you guys. So, and that's the other thing. I feel like there's a level of accountability there, but also, too, I just pick up on the good habits you have. You know, y'all have really good habits, and I pick up on that.
Nate, I have a